Welcome one and all. When I say that there's a lost game for a big franchise like Uncharted, you're probably thinking I mean some god-awful mobile game. But I don't. You see, there is one, the one you're seeing now, a PlayStation Vita exclusive, which to this very day can only be played on the PlayStation Vita. And with that being, let's say, not Sony's best seller, that makes it that little bit more obscure. But to know why this game is such a big deal, let's cast our minds back all the way to 2011. It was a time before the ROG Ally, before the Steam Deck, before the Nintendo Switch. The best, most powerful handheld console on the market, or at least in the mainstream, the Nintendo 3DS. Sony had made great headway into the handheld market with their PlayStation Portable, which is still a fantastic system now, like a PlayStation 2 in your pocket. So everybody was eagerly awaiting what they'd do next. They were expecting power, and the more gritty adult-style games that Sony does compared to Nintendo's more family-friendly offerings. That console was the ill-fated PlayStation Vita, and it launched with one of Sony's biggest current moment franchises, Uncharted, an exclusive full adventure. Now this was a huge deal. We'd never had, at least in my opinion, a full adventure game of this quality on a handheld. It easily compares to PlayStation 3. This is still of a time when you got mobile ports of home console games, which were still fun, still great games, but inevitably a poorer quality than the home console counterpart. With this exclusive, it gave us everything, and it took full advantage of the PlayStation Vita's unique features. But that is the downside. That is the reason why Uncharted Golden Abyss is the least played and forgotten entry in this fantastic, very popular series, because you just can't play it on anything else. The PlayStation Vita had the standard things, obviously the button layout. It only had an L1 and R1 top trigger, it didn't have an L2 and an R2, but apart from that, all standard. Touchscreen, you can get touchscreen handhelds, especially now, obviously the Switch is touchscreen. And gyro controls, whilst at the time, relatively new for handhelds and impressive, again, commonplace. No, the problem is, and the reason you can't play this game on anything other than a PlayStation Vita, it's the rear touchscreen. You have to use it to inspect artifacts, and you can't skip these sections. They are not optional side missions which you can skirt by. Meaning, if you try to emulate this game on anything other than a PlayStation Vita, you can't get past them, so your game inevitably stops when you get to this stage, at a very early point as well, because there's nothing else out there with the rear touchpad. Now, if anybody watching this by chance has found a way around it, obviously I'm no expert at emulation, in fact I know very little about it, so I would be interested to know if a hack around it has been found. But as far as I know, from the research I did before this video, there isn't one. But let's move on from why it's difficult to play this game, and talk about why you should. Story-wise, this is actually a prequel. It takes place before Uncharted Drake's Fortune, the first game in the series. I think it was launched back in 2007 from memory. So because of that, there is no Elena, as he hasn't met her yet. However, there is still a nice gallery of characters to get to know, and decide if they're trustworthy or not, as well as fan favourite Sully making an appearance. The story begins in Panama. He's with an old friend, Jason Dante, at a dig site, headed by the mistrustful Marissa Chase. At the site, bodies of some Spanish conquistadors and a grave marked with a strange symbol are discovered. After Dante mysteriously leaves to make a phone call, Marissa shows Drake an amulet that she'd hidden from him. She inherited it from her grandfather and agrees to team up with Nathan Drake. And thus begins a globe-trotting adventure as you would expect from this franchise, where they discover all manner of things in a search for the fabled Aztec 7 Cities of Gold. I won't go into further detail about the story, simply because I don't like giving spoilers. I want to entice you to play the game as opposed to make it not worth your time picking it up. Suffice to say, it's a full-on Uncharted story as good as any others. It holds its own and it's thoroughly enjoyable. But there's more to a game than the story, and that is the gameplay. I'm delighted to say that it plays just like an Uncharted game should. The key aspects of the climbing around, which you've been watching while I've been talking, you can see are very firmly intact. You can control it with the traditional analog sticks and buttons. There's also a touchscreen option where you can trace a route for Drake to follow and he'll go there as well, whichever you prefer. It's just as good as in any other Uncharted game and tremendous fun, which is actually a really good job because it forms a huge part of the game. Puzzles are of course present. I touched on this briefly talking about how the rear touchpad is used. There's the traditional environmental puzzles which you'll be used to. As you can see here, this is a part where you have to take rubbings from certain columns. You then take the pieces and form them to make one whole picture, which gives you a clue. And later in the game, an infuriating floor tile puzzle, which I really don't like, but it's the only thing about the entire game which I can criticise. So on the whole, still a really good game. Cinematic cutscenes, obviously you have to have those. They help progress the story and hide the loading screens. And finally, the combat. Uncharted is a fantastically capable third-person cover shooter, and fans of the way that plays will not be disappointed. Combat is just as tight and just as much fun as it always has been in all the other games. It's well paced, so you do get a nice, busy, hefty combat section after a lot of the puzzles and the climbing around, so it gives you plenty of variety of gameplay. It's really well thought out, so you've always got something going and you're always kept intrigued and keen and eager to carry on playing. All in all, if you like the Uncharted series, or just this style of game, I got into Uncharted initially because it was being compared to Tomb Raider, and I love Tomb Raider, so anything that would give me a similar experience, I was up for, and I'm so glad I did, because it is that style of game which I absolutely adore, love the stories and the characters, and it is just one of the most perfect franchises for me personally. I think it's a must-have game for any Vita owner. I'll stand by the fact that it is by far and away one of the best on the system. It's also one of the very few which hasn't been ported to other more successful systems as well, and it is just a fantastic time to be had. The question is, of course, is one amazing game enough to make you want to buy the PlayStation Vita system? That is a question for you. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm always intrigued to hear from people. Love to hear different opinions as well. It would help me out a ton if you could tickle the like button and subscribe if you're not already, if you want to see some more of my videos. But if you don't want to, the fact you've watched my video is plenty, and I'm grateful for your time. So until next time, I'll see you soon. Ta-da!